Hey everybody, it is Corey at Linda's. I am here today at the Houston International Quilt Market. I'm here in the Aurifil booth with the one and only master educator, Karen Miller herself. And she is going to walk us through the Aurifil lineup, a little bit of the history, and talking to us about the different threads. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm
It's
so
always
excited.
a pleasure. I'm excited too. It's always great to talk about thread.
I know it's one of your favorite topics.
We love thread here in the Aurifil booth. And let me just tell you a little bit about the Aurifil thread because it's a little different than some other threads on the market.
Okay.
Or most Aurifil thread is 100% Egyptian cotton.
Yeah.
The Egyptian cotton is grown in the Mako region of Egypt,
Okay.
along the River Nile, where the conditions are just right for just the right amount of cotton growth and a luxurious cotton. Aurifil picks cotton by hand. They have the cotton hand picked.
Wow.
When it's just ready, just the right ripeness.
Wow.
And they choose long staple, or extra long staple, Egyptian cotton.
Okay.
The longer the staple of the boll of cotton, the more strength that you get when it's spun together. So they pick it at just the right ripeness, extra long staple, which is about 2 inches or more. Okay. Extra long staple. So that gives it the strength that the Aurifil thread has.
I didn't know there was a ripe cotton.
There is a ripe cotton regular. You think about huge cotton fields and how they're harvested. And I actually just learned this in the last year that the cotton was harvested by hand so that they're sure at just the right ripeness of the cotton boll.
That's amazing.
It is amazing.
So in full honesty, transparency, and candid, I've never looked into what is the hype on Aurifil. And I have a lot of my students, when I'm teaching, they say, I love Aurifil, I use it all the time, and I'm just like, okay. And then, I kind of move on to the next thing.
Right.
And it's a little bit of ignorance on my part, but I'd like to know why should I be using Aurifil? Because I do a lot of paper piecing.
Okay.
I saw that you had an 80 weight. I'm sure we're going to get to that.
Yes.
And I love 80 weight for that.
Wonderful.
So I just want to know kind of why should I be using Aurifil? Why should everybody be using Aurifil?
A couple of things about that. First, in your machine, machines love Aurifil, and there's a couple reasons behind that. So one is that Aurifil has the least amount of lint of all cotton threads. So we're talking 100% Egyptian cotton here. And when you have cotton, you're going to have lint. Yeah. In Italy, they call them feathers. So we singe off those feathers for Aurifil thread. They're singed by going through a naked flame, actually singeing off the excess lint
those little
of
pieces
the thread.
That you see
the little pieces that you see spinning off your thread.
Yeah.
You don't see a lot of them on the Aurifil thread because they're literally singed off. So that's great. That reduces the lint. The other process they do is called mercerization, and that's where the thread is submerged in a caustic soda bath. But that soda bath does is it strengthens the cotton, it changes the organic composition, makes it stronger, again, reducing the amount of lint, but it gets it ready for the dyeing process, which is really important. Aurifil has mostly 270 colors for most of their thread weights.
Okay.
So the other process that's really important with that minimal amount of lint is that the thread, as it's being wound on a spool from the larger giant, what we call a giant cone, down to this is a regular size cone, it passes through a paraffin oil bath. So the paraffin oil bath, again, reduces the amount of lint. It makes the thread glide through your machine with ease. And that's why machines love Aurifil thread. So when everybody tells you they love Aurifil thread, it's because the
machines love it.
The machine is happy.
Right, and if the machine's happy, we're happy.
We are happy. If the machine's not happy, we aren't happy.
Right.
So that's why all the machines love Aurifil thread. So you think about the minimal amount of lint, strength, a huge selection of colors, and just how happy our machines are with it.
Right.
The other thing, it sets Aurifil slightly aside from other threads, cotton threads on the market, is that most Aurifil threads are only 2-ply or 2 strands twisted together. So it's slightly, so when you pick up a spool, for example, the 50 weight, which is the iconic orange spool. Everyone loves Aurifil 50 weight. You should be, if you're not already, using this for piecing in your bobbin. Because it's only 2-ply of 50 weight, the weight is measured by the single strand. So I could have a 3-ply 50 weight, or a 2-ply 50 weight, or a 4-ply 50 weight. So Aurifil's only 2-ply, but most of the other manufacturers are 3. So that means the thread is thicker. You're getting less thread on their spools, more thread on the Aurifil spools. And you can fit a lot more in your bobbin because it's only 2-ply. And your seams are going to press more flat. because there's less thread buildup in a
Okay.
2-ply thread. So everyone in every machine loves the 50 weight 2-ply. Yeah, because the thickness, it's actually thinner.
This is making more sense. Okay.
Yeah, so machines love it. You can put a lot in your bobbin. So think about Aurifil being a 2-ply thread for the most part.
Right.
There's one 3-ply we'll talk about today. So yeah, those are the things that kind of set Aurifil aside. And plus the fact that they, in their dyeing and drying wardrobes, they do minimal amounts of thread skeins in there in order to get the highest quality. It's a family-owned business in Milan, Italy. There's a warehouse or a headquarters here in America in Chicago. Their own employees, no distribution centers that are hired outward. It's all, family-owned, and employment is, one-on-one. They're not shipping it out to anybody else.
Right.
It's got great basics. They're very environment-friendly. There's so many great things about the family business and the Aurifil thread. Not only just the thread, but everything that backs the thread.
The whole component that comes
Yeah,
together.
absolutely.
I want to roll back to something that you said a second ago that I think is very interesting, that when people are comparing different weights of threads, and if they're the same weight, even if they're comparing a 50 weight Aurifil to a 50 weight something else, there can be a difference in thickness, and you're talking about how the weight of the thread is based off of 1 ply.
That's right.
That's very interesting.
It is, and that's not common knowledge.
Right, no, it's not.
Right, so I learned it when I was learning like a handwork needle turn applique, and I bought another brand of 50 weight and an Aurifil 50 weight, and I didn't understand why they were 2 different thicknesses because they were both 50 weight.
Right.
It didn't make any sense to me until, alas, I learned so much about thread when I fell in love with Aurifil. I'm like, oh, it's the ply thing, but no one ever told me that. I didn't know.
It's not readily available knowledge, so that's very nice of you to share with us. That's awesome.
Oh my, it's so important.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so take us through the different weights and offerings that Aurifil has. I know that you just introduced an 8 weight.
Yes,
is that correct?
so
So can we start with 8 and then work our way up?
So we're going to start with 8 weight. So remember, the lower the number, the thicker the thread.
Correct.
Okay, so 8 weight is actually brandly new.
Brandly new.
Brandly new.
We're starting a new word.
Yeah.
We're getting t-shirts and everything.
We love Brandly. It's brand new, introduced just this past year. There's a 45, there'll be 45 colors before too long.
Okay.
But this 8 weight is going to come on a white wooden spool. It's the thickest thread that Aurifil makes, and it's 2-ply. Remember, the 2-ply comes into play here also. So it's some people would compare it to a pearl cotton, although the twist might be slightly different than a pearl cotton. You still have beautiful sheen. And you have 100% cotton thread. So the great is that it comes on a spool. So if you're being adventurous, you could put it on your machine and do some top stitching with it. Not necessarily recommended, but I love those adventurous folks that I'm going to try this.
Just going to see if it does.
You can do some beautiful things. I'll show you some handwork, but we could take some pictures of some machine work. Yeah,
of course.
So you can see it. So this is Aurifil 8 weight on a white spool. Remember, all the Aurifil spools are color coded. So I don't need to look on the bottom of this with my bifocals on to see what weight it is. I know because it's on a white wooden spool, it's always 8 weight.
Right.
And then the color coding we'll talk about when we go through each one.
Okay.
So let me show you 2 samples with the 8 weight, and I'm sure your consumers would love to see. This is one just a little handwork.
Oh my gosh, that's
beautiful.
beautiful.
Just some really decorative handwork embroidery stitches. And what's important when you're doing handwork with any thread really is that you have the right size eye of the needle to handle this. You almost don't want the eye of the needle to be too large. You don't want the thread to slide too much in the eye, but you don't want it so tight that it's getting stressed every time you pull it through.
The friction and the shredding and stuff like that can happen with that.
Absolutely. And the other thing to remember about thread, especially for hand stitching, is that thread actually has a nap. New news, right?
Yes.
I mean, I love the way Tulip Pink describes it. She's like, if you're going against the nap of the thread, it's like pulling a Christmas tree through a doorway the wrong way. Right? I love the way she does. I'm like, oh, that's perfect. I'm going to reuse this.
Yeah.
So there's a nap of the thread, so you always want to knot the last end cut, and you want to thread your needle with the current end.
Okay.
So with the 8 weight, whatever we just did with it, it's around somewhere.
Where is it?
We threw it away. Here it is. So I'm always going to thread my needle with this end that's already available to me.
Okay.
And then when I cut the other end, I'm going to knot that end. And if you do that, you're always going to be working with the nap of the thread.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, it won't matter for small little projects, but when you're doing a lot of hand stitching, it may come into play. The other thing that happens when you work against the nap is it it's putting a lot of stress on the thread.
Right.
So your thread might be breaking on you and you don't understand why. Because maybe you're not working with the nap, and
Right.
every time you push it the wrong way through
You're
the doorway,
pulling that Christmas tree the wrong
yeah,
way.
then you're like stressing it out,
Right.
and everything's coming undone. It's like, no, my ornaments are falling
Right.
off. Please don't do that to me. So anyhow, that's another little tidbit of
Okay.
information. Okay.
Love that.
So here's one other little sample done with the Aurifil 8-way,
cute.
and this was with the Evolve collection. This collection is Indelible by Anna Maria Perry. And this was with Evolve by Susie Quilts. So those are two
Stunning.
8-way samples, aren't they lovely?
Yes, they are.
I love working with the 8-way, and I force myself to learn a new stitch like every time I do it. 'cause
Right.
hand embroidery is fun.
Yeah.
I love machine work, but I love hand embroidery as well. So how about onward and upward to
You keep
12-way?
moving on,
We're getting
yes.
a little bit thinner now. We're going to go to the Aurifil 12-way that always comes on a red spool.
Okay.
So this is the cotton version of 12-way. It's cotton 2-ply.
Okay.
And it's also lovely for handwork. I throw this also in my machine though, and I
Yeah.
love using this on a home machine for some free motion or top stitching.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at a pair of jeans and you see maybe the top stitching that's down your
Yes.
seam,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Or if it has just the right colors for that type of top stitching, and the 12-weight works lovely for that.
Perfect.
Really important though to again choose the right needle for your machine because it's so thick. You want a size 116, is that 116? Yeah, 116.
116, yeah.
And I love the top stitch needle because a top stitch needle has a groove all the way down the shaft of the needle. So an elongated eye with the groove down the shaft on a top stitch needle works wonderfully. Now on this thread, on a machine, you probably want to use a 40 weight in the bobbin. Generally you would use 50 weight for everything, but this is so thick that sometimes you need something a little bit more comparable in thickness.
To balance it out.
So, yeah. So just that information is on a little card that we'll show everybody before we're done. So
Okay.
12 weight sample. Here's a 12 weight sample. This is a little pattern that I did years ago.
Look at this.
Called, Spring Wren, I believe I called it. But the 12 weight is perfect for your French knots, for your hand stitching, for stitching around the birds.
Okay.
You could even kind of do the decorative stitch around your binding if you wanted to with the 12 weight thread.
Right, frame it nicely with that
Yeah.
little bit of thicker thread.
So the great thing also about the 12 weight, all the Aurifil threads, because they come on the spool, is you can throw that 12 weight in your machine. If you're not into hand stitching, you can still do a blanket stitch in the machine. Right, so you could really
yes.
fuse down the wool or
Right.
the applique
Right.
and do a blanket stitch on your machine versus this was done by hand.
Right.
Right, so you don't have to do it on the machine.
That's so cool.
Right?
There's
Great
multiple
idea.
different ways to use it.
Yeah, I love that. That's how
Yeah.
I justify buying it all.
Sold.
Yeah, sometimes they send me some too. I got that
You know
little
people.
bone. I know people.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the background of this is 50 weight, free
Okay.
motion quilted on a home machine. Really dense machine quilting.
Yeah.
The 50 weight is so fine that you can backtrack a lot without your machine getting grumbly at you.
Right.
And if you mess up, no one's gonna know because it's so fine.
Right.
So you don't. So
Looks
you
like
don't
it's supposed
worry
to go
about
there.
it. Yeah. Another wool applique sample.
Oh my gosh, look
Yeah.
at that.
Isn't it beautiful? So you
That's
can do the
stunning.
wool stitches, the French knots,
Right.
blanket stitch. If you run out or you don't have the right color 12 weight, you could always use the next weight we're going to talk about
Okay.
and just double it up, and it's very close to the
Oh.
thickness of 12 weight. So
Okay.
another little sample. And then on this sample, the 12 weight was used for top stitching. These stripes here. So I know
Ooh,
you're
look
going to
at
show
that.
some beautiful samples of
Yes.
that.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, so the top stitching just gives just a little extra and because Aurifil has that beautiful sheen that comes from the mercerization, and that paraffin oil bath really builds up the sheen. So it's not going to be an unnatural sheen. It's just going to be a beautiful cotton sheen, not overwhelming,
Right.
but just enough.
It's
so
a natural look to
yeah,
it.
we love that.
That's
So
beautiful.
top stitching with Aurifil 12 weight.
Okay.
Yeah, so the next weight is 28 weight. Now the color coding for 28 weight is gray. So the spool is going to be gray, top and bottom. And this is one of my favorite colors. This is 2130 butter.
Okay.
And I love butter. It just kind of blends really great with muslin
Yeah.
or just a neutral background. So I love to use it because the thread is a little more in your face, but the colors can be toned down slightly so things just look beautiful together. So the 28 weight, personally for me, I'm a free motion quilter on a home machine mostly. So I love 28 weight for that because
Okay.
your thread will show up. It won't be grumpy about the thickness, won't give you trouble or your machine trouble.
Okay.
But it'll just show up with a beautiful sheen. You can also do the hand stitching that I mentioned, embroidery, top stitching. cross stitch, sashiko. There's so many
Wow.
different uses, right?
So many different
for
variations for it.
Yeah, so this is the 28 weight on the gray spool.
Okay.
And I think you're gonna show everyone this sample here. This was a little
Yes.
heart that was done on a Singer featherweight with just some pretty little feathers. And it's lovely to just see the texture that the thread gives. You know, it just has a beautiful texture.
But still, it's even being a little bit of that thicker thread, it's still looking really beautiful
Yeah,
on here,
thank
especially for
you.
doing it on the sewing machine.
Yeah.
Doing this free motion on a Singer.
On a
featherweight.
featherweight, yeah. And it was just one of those little experiments myself, another aura philosopher and myself, we challenged each other to use a thread weight that we're not familiar with a lot
Yeah.
and to do something different. So we both worked on home machines and made little hearts and kind of just shared our experiences on an Aurifil blog post.
That's
so it was
awesome.
a lot of fun.
That's
I'll show
really
you
cool.
the other one that goes along with that in a minute.
Okay.
But another little 28 weight sample on the featherweight was this little feather sample.
Look at that.
Yes, it's so fun. So the gray is the 28 weight, and then in between you have the 50 weight. That's the same color as
red.
the linen.
Okay.
So you can't really see the 50
No.
weight thread that much because it's so fine.
But it adds beautiful dimension and shadowing
yeah,
to
and
your
that's
project.
the wool batting.
Yeah.
You have a particular brand that you use in the shop, don't you?
Yes, I use Hobbs.
You use Hobbs.
Yes, I
well, the
love the
Hobbs
heirloom
wool
wool.
is lovely.
Yeah.
Yep, that works wonderfully.
Yeah.
The wool batting just gives such texture.
Yeah.
I love the wool batting for texture. I could show you 28 weight samples until we're here all day, but here's just a couple more 28 weight samples. This was
Oh
done on
my
the long arm.
gosh.
This is what I
Wow.
call doodle quilting. And this is a doodle quilt also. This was done on a long arm.
And this was with the 28?
Yeah, with the
weight?
28 weight, and again the wool batting. The wool batting just
That's
looks so lovely.
stunning.
So you may, on a long arm, you're not going to speed through it. You may
Right.
slow down a little bit, maybe increase your stitch length slightly because of the thickness of the thread.
Correct, yeah.
But it just gives it such beautiful dimension.
That's stunning.
And again, a 2-ply thread. This was all done on a home machine. Same kind of doodling
Right.
effect, but
It's a different look.
Yeah, done
Yeah.
on a home machine, and this is more of a linen, so it's a little stiffer, especially because it's so densely quilted.
Right.
Right? Beautiful. You've got to try the 28 weight.
I'm gonna have to.
On a home machine, on a long arm, for handwork, cross stitch, just so many lovely uses for it. It's my favorite.
Okay, I'm gonna have to get some.
Yes, don't have to leave the booth without it. So 40 weight is the next weight that comes on the green spool.
Okay.
And 40 weight is actually one of the original weights that was done, and we'll give it we'll have some
We'll
pictures
get a
of a
sample
sample
for it.
because it's not at our fingertips.
Okay.
But it was one of the original weights that Aurifil made 40 years ago in Italy because they specialized in Italy using multi-head embroidery machines.
Okay.
They were using someone else's cotton thread at the time and were unhappy with the quality of it. That's how Aurifil was born, out of a desire to have the highest quality Egyptian cotton thread at their fingertips for multi-head embroidery machines.
Wow, okay.
Yes, it's so exciting. And we'll have to make sure you take some pictures of the 8-weight thread, the embroidery
yes.
that was done in Italy with those machines.
Yeah.
So a 40-weight, lovely for machine embroidery. If you want a little bit more strength for your finishing off your hand binding, you could piece with it. It's just going to be slightly thicker than
Right.
a 50 weight.
Right.
Garment sewing, bag sewing, those are the types of things people want just a little bit more strength in this 2-ply cotton thread. And
Okay.
we'll have a picture of some machine embroidery that was done with it for
Okay.
for your followers. So that's the 40 weight. Let's talk 50.
Let's talk
Everybody's
the
big.
iconic orange
The
spool.
iconic orange spool. This one's been used. But isn't this is the iconic orange spool.
Yes.
50 weight, 2-ply, so fine. Your seams will press flat. You can put a ton of this in your bobbin.
Right.
When you purchase this spool of 50 weight, you don't realize how much thread is actually on the spool.
Right.
Because it's only 2-ply, you're getting like almost double the amount of thread on this spool that you would get on a comparable 3-ply
Three-ply.
thread spool. So when people look at the pricing, they get a little afraid of
Right.
the Aurifil pricing, but actually they need to look at the number of yards or meters that are actually on the spool.
That makes sense.
And most people say when they buy a large spool of Aurifil thread, like lasts them several quilts. They start buying cones
Right.
because these actually come on a size this size. Also,
Ah,
a cone.
I didn't know the 50 weight, the 2-ply comes on the cone as well.
They all do, yeah. So
Oh.
if you're really in love with a particular color for your piecing, you should always buy it on the. If you buy it on the cone, then you're going to have even a better value.
And you'll have it
much
for
better value.
quite some time.
Yeah, like years. It lasts forever. Don't make me quote meters or yards, but it's all in the book.
Right.
So I'm not so great at that. Yeah, so 50 weight, I just have a couple samples.
Okay.
This sample, the quilting, the needle turn applique happened to be done with the 50 weight.
Okay.
But you could have also used the 80 weight for the needle turn applique. It wasn't out at the time I made this sample.
Right.
But the needle turn applique, the quilting, of course piecing, all 50 weight. So
Love it.
yeah, lovely little dimension that
Beautiful.
you can get out of the 50 weight. Let's see. Oh, and this little guy was done with 50 weight also, this little pumpkin.
Oh, the pumpkin.
Yeah, it's kind of a combination of free motion
Cute.
quilting and some decorative machine stitching.
Wow.
Yeah, and then the background just a simple cross,
So
grid.
everything on this was all done in a 50 weight.
Yeah,
Wow.
it was. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yes, thank you. It's just a lovely little pattern. And do I have anything else? Oh, this little guy, well, it's going to kind of bleed us into talking about floss.
Okay.
But this has 50 weight for the center feathers.
Okay.
And some of the echo quilting, and then some decorative machine stitching along the outside.
Oh.
But also the thing on this sample, this was a collection by Wendy Shepard, and she had floss in her collection as well. I believe it was called
Okay.
Indigo.
Okay.
So the 6-strand divisible floss that Aurifil sells is also integrated into this sample. So what a huge contrast between the really fine 50 weight thread
Right.
and then 6 strands of floss, which is quite hefty.
Wow, yeah.
But just a nice way to accent something small for a gift or, for hand stitching.
And it's a good way to show not to be afraid to test and play with different weights on one project. Because they can
Absolutely.
provide a completely different look.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You have to. I think playing is such a great way to learn.
Yeah.
Especially if you're playing on something that's not that important to you.
Right.
Because it gives you an opportunity to grow and learn. And I think one of the reasons I fell in love with Aurifil was because there were so many different weights to conquer.
Right.
So
You have to get through
the
all of them.
Playing
Yeah.
came into play, and I love that. I love investigating and dissecting, figuring out how it works, what size needle I use, what to put in the bobbin.
Right.
All those things are really important. So playing allows you to kind of grow,
Cool.
right?
Yeah.
We all grow from it.
Well, yeah, and it's the way you learn.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the 80 weight, which you already are
Yes,
using.
I want to know all about it because I use 80 weight for my paper piecing. I just love the way that it helps everything lay flat, especially
Yeah.
when the seams come together.
Yeah.
And I use a different brand of thread, and I want to know why I need to use the 80 weight Aurifil because I'm very excited about this part.
The 80 weight Aurifil comes on an iconic cherry wooden spool.
Love it already.
Right now, that's the only spool it's delivered on.
Okay.
Times do change, but things may change.
We're gonna need that on the large
Yeah,
spool. You
we
know
love
people.
this.
I need you to.
We'll put some tips into the crew, but love this. And when Aurifil introduced this, it was really for handwork.
Yeah.
Needle turn applique where you want your stitches to disappear into the background because it's only 2-ply thread. It's very fine, almost like the thickness of silk. If some of your followers work with silk,
Yeah.
silk is almost like a 90 or 100 weight. This is 80 weight, very close to that. But this thread is not going to stress your fabric out like silk doesn't give.
Right. No.
Silk, poly, nylon, they don't give.
Yeah.
Cotton is going to give. So if there was ever a snag or a challenge, the cotton might break for you, and then nothing gets damaged, and you
Right.
can redo the break.
Right.
Where with some other unnatural fiber or something that's so strong it doesn't give,
Right.
you could actually damage the fibers around it or the quilt around it. But the 80 weight is very fine. So as you stitch, the stitches disappear into your background. So for needle turn applique, dense machine quilting where you don't want to worry about buildup, EPP. Some people love to use it for foundation paper piecing
Yeah.
as well, where oftentimes in foundation paper piecing you're bringing several seams together.
Yes.
So the seams will press even more flat with this fine weight thread.
I'm just gonna steal that.
Yeah,
We'll be done for the day.
absolutely. Yeah, bingo. You've got to use it. And again, it's very important to use the right needle,
Yeah.
right? So if your needle has too much slop in the eye, then you're going to put some stress on your thread. If you're not working with the nap of the thread, you'll put stress on the thread. Oftentimes, we worry about the eye being large enough, but we don't think about it. It could be too large,
Right.
where it's slopping back and forth and putting stress on the
Messing
thread.
up some things.
And I think the other common thing that I see as an educator is that we're used to if we're using a poly or a nylon thread, we're used to really yanking on that. Like our
Yes.
hand is hard.
Right.
Right. And so sometimes technique has to change slightly when you're working with cotton.
Yeah.
But for EPP, when you just do your tiny little whip stitches,
Right.
they're going to disappear back there.
Stunning.
Yeah, and
Okay.
remember the strength comes in the multiple small stitches being side by side.
Right.
You can break cotton thread with your hands.
Of course, yeah.
So you're gaining that strength from having multiple small stitches side by side. So
Cool.
really important with 80 weight. And here's a little sample of an 80 weight feather.
Gosh.
You can get so much detail out of 80 weight.
Wow.
It's just so fine. You can machine embroider with it. This was done again on the featherweight. You can hand work with it. Needle turn applique, English paper piecing, all those lovely uses
So
for 80
beautiful.
weight.
Okay, you've sold me.
Yeah, you've got to have it. You've got to have it. Yeah, so that's the 80 weight.
Okay. What's the next one?
The other one, I guess, that we haven't talked about yet is a little thicker than everything else, but it's the 40 weight 3-ply.
Ah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you know how I mentioned most of the Aurifil thread is 2-ply.
Yeah.
But a few years ago, Aurifil was looking at how they could expand the products and said, you know what, the long arm quilters are asking for something a little stronger, but not too awful thick.
Right.
So they came out with 40 weight 3-ply. So they took their iconic 40 weight, the very original machine embroidery thread, and added one more strand to it.
Okay.
So this is 2-ply, this is 40 weight 3-ply on a cone. And so the thickness is very nice. It's a nice thickness to use. The buildup isn't too much on your long arm. I use it on my long arm, and I love that I can go right to left, left to right without the shredding or the breaking. I don't know what needles you use in the shop on your long arms, but I love particularly using the MR needle.
I love an MR needle.
Okay,
from
good.
Grossbecker. Yep.
Grossbecker MR needle, that multi-range, multi-directional needle with your 40 weight 3-ply will go in any direction without shredding or breaking. Always make sure you're pulling this straight off the top, right? Straight off the top. Your first thread guide has to be right up there in the middle. And then sometimes you have to go around a barber pole,
different things.
a couple different directions.
Yeah.
But you'll try it, you make it work. 40 weight 2-ply works great in the bobbin. You can put more of that in the bobbin.
And then this 40 weight 3-ply, it's still going through the exact same amazing processes that you spoke about at the beginning, the paraffin oil, all of that stuff.
Yeah, the mercerization, the singeing, the paraffin oil bath. It's another just cotton thread. And it works lovely. It only comes on the cone. Let's see what else about.
And it's a yellow cone.
Yeah, a yellow cone. Okay. That's the color coding for the 40 weight 3-ply.
I'm paying attention to that.
This is it. You are our new educator. We're gonna have you here at the show next year. This is a little machine. This was quilted on a home machine, but with the 40 weight 3-ply.
Okay.
So you can see that it has like a nice presence on the top, and the buildup isn't too bad.
No, not at all.
And it just works lovely. Remember, when you're working with a cotton thread on a long arm, it is still cotton.
Right.
And although Aurifil is virtually lint-free, cotton can't be lint-free.
It's a natural fiber. It's going to happen.
We get so spoiled with using our non-cotton threads on the long arm with no worry about anything in the bobbin that we have to just make some fine adjustments, which is cleaning your bobbin, maybe every other bobbin clean underneath there.
Right.
Always make sure we start with a new needle that's properly sized, right? And all that fun stuff. Something else you can do with the 43 is just thread painting or collage work. So these are leaves, and they were, I'm like, I couldn't find a word.
It's okay. I would have gone with it, whatever you said.
These
are those things on the trees.
This was thread painted with Aurifil 40 weight 3-ply, and the background quilting was done with the 40 weight 3-ply as well. And,
beautiful.
Yeah, and then the monofilament, which we haven't talked about, but Aurifil makes a nylon monofilament. It comes on. They call this the large spool, but there's also a cone that has netting around it.
Okay.
And the difference between Aurifil and other monofilaments is that they use nylon versus poly. Okay. It's one of the only threads that they sell that's not cotton or natural fibers.
Right.
But I love it. Done a lot of testing with it. It's great when you have that quilt that has so many multitude of colors that you can't find just the right color match.
Yeah.
And it looks lovely, like in this batik where you have all these color changes and you just want to get some stitching in it, right? And you don't have to worry about color choices. So I love the monofilament for that. You have to remember though, because it's like fishing line, you really need to reduce that top tension.
Of course.
Quite a bit. Lots of top tension
and
reduction.
That is, so the monofilament, is that a 100 weight, 90 weight?
Yeah, it's about 100 weight. Yeah, I mean, it's about 100 weight. Okay. And it's very fine. So the cones come with a netting over them. Yes. And you, from experience, you don't want to remove the netting.
No, you don't.
You want to try to find that beginning of the spool, you know, without removing the netting. Else you'll have like the thread. These are called what we call stacked wound.
Okay.
Where they're not cross wound.
Okay.
All right. A cross wound spool would be the cotton spools where they're cross wound, and you can actually see the X's in them.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So a cross wound spool loves to have the spool thread delivered over the top of the spool. So if you have a vertical pin, when you have a cross wound spool of any brand, the thread wants to go straight up on a vertical pin.
Okay.
If you don't have a guide that goes up there, then sometimes you can use an external thread stand behind your machine.
Right.
Or you can, get something that works for you. But if you have a horizontal stand, then you want to put it on horizontal. You want to make sure the cap is not larger than the thread. You want to make sure you use a small cap. You don't want your thread to touch anything besides thread guides.
Okay.
Everything your thread touches can cause trouble with thread.
Right. Adds all sorts of different things to the process.
Absolutely. And the other thing we recommend is sometimes you have to loosen that bottom flange a little bit. When the thread's coming off the bottom, you don't want it to be stressed down here. We'll talk more about that in another little clip. But yeah, so this is just some tips there.
Cool.
40 weight 3-ply monofilament.
You've went through all of it with us.
We've done it all.
That's wonderful.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking us through that. I really appreciate it. You've sold me on a few things. I can't leave. Might just take all the samples with me and just dip. You're going to turn around, they're all going to be gone, but that's fine.
Yeah,
everything's fine.
That's it. You go. It's
Alrighty.
awesome. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for watching with us and joining me here in the Aurifil booth with Karen, the master educator for Aurifil. And I can't wait to meet up with you again. We're going to do some cool stuff.
Awesome. Thank you, Corey.
Alrighty, thank you.
It's been fun.
See you guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.